The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
So, hello and welcome to this webcast about the AMable Open Call. I'm pretty happy to have you in the line. We're a European project which is trying to support SMEs in the uptake of additive manufacturing, as you see on the screen. And I will quickly run you through what the project is about and what the Open Call wants to see and what kind of options are in for you. So let's quickly have a look on the agenda for today. There's a short disclaimer with some rules and some hints towards official documents. We'll talk about the project aims and its objectives. The Open Call in a short story. What are functional parts? That is one of the key things that you should look at when applying to the Open Call. Then the different kinds of experiment types, what kind of partners and roles are necessary, and finally a short dig into how the evaluation is being done and how things are going to be implemented. So let's quickly start with a disclaimer. Please be aware that the webcast and anything that you read somewhere in the press is only informative. The official documents can be found on our website, amable.eu/calls, and they have a few sections where you find the relevant documents. On the bottom of this slide, you see Guide for Applicants. This is the main document describing the conditions and the call itself. You find there a proposal template which you can use to fill in your project idea. And you find a FSTP contract template, that means financial support to third parties, which would be you if you win. And this is the contract that's going to be signed as a basis for the experiments. So please, if you want to have any official kind of statement, you can ask us, but the documents are the thing to look at. Project aims and objectives. AMable. AMable is a collation of competence centers across Europe. What we want to do is we want to connect all of these in Digital Innovation Hub that provides what we call the digital orchestra, so services from design to production on a digital path. Complementary competences is a second point, because within the consortium there are partners that focus on metals, partners that focus on plastics, and partners that are key on ceramics. You have partners that are more in the deposition part, those that are more in the powder part, and some are doing binder jetting. So all these competences team up in order to provide a solution to everyone. We want to develop what we call a services arena, so the AMable services arena, which then contains services like design brokerage, services like construction support, services for industrial uptake, for simulation, and all different things that support you in getting from an idea to a first prototype. What is on the base of that is business development support. So to look at business plans, to look at value propositions, and help you to identify if there's a real market for you, and also to identify high potential solutions. So how to go on from doing the experiment into future production. All that should support the uptake of AM, so to bring together competencies, to scale up the SMEs, and to bring AM to a higher use level. This is a set of competence centers that you currently see on the screen. On the bottom line, you see Partners for Data Management, which is Industrial Data Space Association, and also partners on finance and business, which is Keenbull, which is Strategy End, a part of Price Waterhouse, Zabala as an innovation consulting agency, and EWF for training. So all these partners team up in AMable in order to provide support. This is the services arena, or at least the graphics that wants to convey what the services arena is about. You have an entry point wherever you want to enter the services arena. If it is at concept stage, if it is on construct stage, or if you just go for print and finish. The exit should somehow be a walk to the market. So you should be able to go to real production after having done the experiment, after having used the services arena to support and to update your skills. What is in there are these blue areas like design for AM, visualization, analytics, industrialization, certification. So full set of services which, to point it out again, are written down in the guide for applicants. So in the attachment of the guide for applicants, you find the description of those services. All that is based on the business platform, which is the competencies on economical questions, technology platform, which is the competencies on printing and design, and skills and education platform, which fuels the training part. This is one example of a service description. This is the service visualization and immersive design. If you look at the very bottom, service key benefits, then you see there what we want to achieve with providing this service. And that is ability to realistically visualize a product, direct involvement of the customer to get feedback already during the design phase, and the final point, enabling product customization. Another service is designed for AM, service key benefits, de-risking the build. So to have a service that already looks at key features when you go to print, that these are safe from the design stage. Data. I told you that AMable also looks at the digital data. So this is our vision on the digital data chain. If you have an idea, if you sketch this idea on paper, you have a starting point. At some point, you're going to print. So then to refer back to the idea is often a problem. Our approach in this is use the idea, write it on paper, scan this paper so that you have a document. Now, this document, that is one of the key statements from us, this document remains with you. But what you can do is to run this document through what we call a hashing algorithm. You create a digital fingerprint of this document. So it's only a fingerprint, it's not the content of the document. But you can take this fingerprint and plug it, or let's say register it with the data chain. So by logging this fingerprint into the data chain, at any later stage, you can refer to this fingerprint. So you can say, okay, but this was my idea with pointing on this fingerprint. If someone asks, okay, where does this fingerprint belong to? Then you can run again your file through the hashing algorithm, produce another fingerprint, and these two fingerprints will be the same if your document is still the same. So with this approach, the document remains with you. So respect of data ownership, it's the bottom bullet on this slide. But you can still prove at any later stage that this document existed with you. In practical terms, if you look here at this diagram, you have company data on the left side in this diagram in this blue box. You take a part of this data because you want to use a service provider. You take this data, put it onto what we call the AMable IDS connector, and in this orange part, this fingerprint is being created and put into the blockchain. So if you press the button on this AMable IDS connector, then this data that you uploaded is being transferred to your service provider. He can check if what he received really is the same as in the fingerprint. So he can also prove that, or assure that the data that he's starting to work on is really your data. Now, once he finished his work, he's going to send back another pack of data from him to you. Again, he runs it into this AMable IDS connector. The orange box creates the fingerprint, and in return, you can look if what you received is really what he sent. What this approach ensures is, point number one, data remains with you if you want to remain with you. It is being transferred to the identified service provider that you want to send the data to, you can assure that the data is the same that you sent off at the point when he receives it, and the same the way back. So this is a, let's say, interchange principle that ensures that data is received by the one that should receive it and in the format and with the content that it should receive. Let's come to the open call in a short story. It is about ideas for a functional product. So if you have a functional product that really needs AM to become alive, then you're right with us. If you can tell the story and sell the story publicly, so to talk about the product that you want to launch, then you're right with us. But there needs to be a gap, so you need to have something missing which you can get from the AMable services arena in order to support you in the implementation. If that is again the case, then point number one is completely solved. Point number two, you can get support from the European Additive Manufacturing Competence Centers, so from AMable through our services. And point number three, you can even get funding for your own development activities. So for your personnel in your company, and also some support for other costs. Now, what you need to do is you need to write up your story. So what's the idea? What is your starting point in additive manufacturing? And how does your idea relate to the state of the art? You know, I mean, we won't help you in doing the same as 10 other people already do, because there might not be a market. But if it's a good idea, if it is really innovative, then this is the step. Present your business case. Where will you sell? How will you produce? And what will be your market? So how will the money come back to you? This business perspective is very important to provide support. Then you need to describe definitely your development plan. So you need to have an idea. You don't have to precisely describe everything because it's part of the process, but you need to have an idea of what your risks are, what the success factors are, so what will make your product a success. You will need to define, as I said in the front, your gap, so what AMable services will support you, and then you just need to fill in the proposal template and send it off to us. What are functional parts? There are some examples on our website. For example, here, the end of a motor fork. So if you have this motorbike and you look at the end of the fork of this motorbike, then any weight that is attached to this end reduces the handling capability of the motorbike. So if you produce this lighter and stiffer and with a larger integration of functions, then you have a clear benefit to the motorbike, to the driver, and to the driving experience. This, from our perspective, is a functional part, which needs AM, because in most of the cases of this integration, you can't do it by conventional processing. The same is true for this vinyl cartridge. So if you're a fan of music, then you know what the key performance is for such a cartridge. It needs to be light, it needs to have the right weight, and it needs to be, let's say, neutral to the sound in order to reproduce what's in this line on the vinyl disc. So this construction is so complex that you can't create it by milling. And you can integrate a number of different components that would make up the final product. So this is also a case of a functional part. Experiment types, partners, and roles. We structured the experiments into 4 phases. 3 of those you will cross mainly. So that's the entry, where you write up, where you check, where you assess your product proposition, and we will run this against challenges towards the business case, towards the technology, and towards the development plan. The execution is the implementation of all the services that are being identified to support the product development. The evaluation is the final, let's say, assessment of what you achieved, if the product really works as expected, if the customers would be happy, etc. What's done as a very final discussion within the experiment is the evaluation. So it means have a look back onto the originally proposed business case and on the originally proposed performance. So what is still necessary? Is the product really viable for the market? What needs still to be done? And what future funding schemes you might use in order to grow your business? This is the structure of the experimentation phases. Now, there are two main experiment types, and these are now displayed in the table on the right. A feasibility study, which is more a short experiment. We expect that to be between 3 and 6 months. It only needs a supplier, so this SME that wants to produce this part. The proposal length is 4 pages. It should touch TRL 3 to 5, so it should be something that is viable, no basic research in this, but it doesn't need to be fully fledged developed at the end. So it might end at 5, or it might perhaps go to 6. So the 3 to 5 is the indication of where it should sit. Number of services being used, 1 to 3, so at least 1. We would not consider that it's possible to use more than 3. And the cost that could occur lie between 5 and 25,000 euros. If you want to do a best practice experiment, as the name already says, this is a bit longer experiment. Runs from 4 to 12 months. The proposal length is 10, and one of the key differences is you need a user. This user needs to be in the experimentation team, and his role is to describe the key performance measures, to describe specifications, and let's say to play the role of the market and of the first adopting user. This will guide the best practice experiment towards a real robust prototype that is absolutely targeted towards the market. Let's quickly discuss evaluation and implementation. Now, the evaluation process will be done by external experts. So look also at the call for evaluators. We describe there that we need experts that come from the field and that will evaluate your proposal. And they will then let pass experiments that are of adequate quality, which will then go to an internal listing according to the rules that are set out in the guide for applicants. On the bottom, you see, as an example, only the headlines here. In the guide for applicants, there's a concrete description. But you see here the proposal evaluation criteria. So the first criterion is impact of the experiment and the anticipated result. So after the experiment, what will be the benefit? Criterion number 2, excellence of the idea and approach. So how good is the idea with respect to the additive manufacturing challenge, with respect to the product features, and how well is the approach in order to develop this product. And the third one, quality and efficiency of the implementation. This definitely looks at how well is the implementation plan and what is the price, or what is the anticipated cost from your side in order to support the development on your side. Now, the way it is equal and the threshold, that means you need to pass the threshold. So a mark between 3 and 5 will bring you onto the internal listing. Financial support to third parties. If you should not know this, it is a mechanism to collaborate in projects funded by the European Commission under the rules of Horizon 2020. So this means that AMable has a budget. AMable will sign a contract with you and act as sort of a representative of the European Commission, so we will act on behalf of the European Commission. The rules are still Horizon 2020 rules, so every cost that is eligible if it is eligible by the H2020 rules. You sign the contract with the coordinator, which is Fraunhofer IoT, and you will then deliver this work and operate the experiment as described. We will take your reporting and communicate that with the Commission, so that in the end you will only deal with us, not directly with the Commission. The call identifier for this call is AMable OC2, so it's our second open call. The deadline is 1st of June 2019, 1700 Brussels time. Submission is by email. The total budget is 300,000 euros. Funding rate 70% of eligible cost. And as I explained earlier, the types of experiments are feasibility study experiments and best practice experiments with the indicated TRL and durations. You will need just an SME with an innovative product idea and the supplier role for the feasibility study experiment. For the best practice, you need 2 partners or 2 roles, the supplier role and the user role. The call documents you find on the amable.eu/calls. You can write to tutors at amable.eu if you want to look for a tutor that guides you through the experiments. And submissions and inquiries would need to go to oc2@amable.eu. Yes, and that is mainly what I wanted to talk to you about. Now let me have a quick look. I think we have quite a minute or two. If there are any questions in the chat. Yes, I currently see one question there. That is, can the SME get AMable funding, in brackets second call, to use a service provider who has already been identified outside of AMable partners? The French SME would like to work with a specific German company. So the principle of AMable is that AMable provides funding for the SME itself. If an SME wants to use a service provider that is not within the AMable consortium, then this service provider would not be eligible for funding. If they want to use that service provider, that's fine for us. But as I said, we can't provide funding for this service provider, but only to the SME. I hope that answers the question. So you can run this inside of AMable, and the service provider may provide support to the SME, so to the experimentation team, but the external cost will not be covered by AMable. If you have any further questions, then write to us. If there's anything else, look at our website. There's a lot of information available on functional parts and especially on the core documents. Download them, use the template to provide your idea, and remember, it's only a number of days left. So we have the 21st today, and 1st of June is the date to submit. 4 pages for the feasibility studies, 10 pages for the best practice experiments. I hope this information was helpful to you, and we look forward to seeing your application. Bye.